Do all the tables have a table rep that's going to share before I introduce our guest? All right, they're going to be picking up the plates. That's type I think nobody's talking about like I eat too much. Like, did I move really much? Like, I'm not taking what you eat. Right? Like, every time. That's like, yeah, the daily morning hard to take it off. All right, we ready? Okay, so what keeps us up at night? Before we're going to hear from each table, I'm going to share a little bit with you about what keeps me up at night. I've been working since I was 13 years old, and I am 56. So I worked for 43 years in corporate America. I was blessed to move into leadership very, very early, even though in my mind I wanted to go to law school. But by the time I got to college, I already had 8 years of working, and doing accounting and bookkeeping and operations, finance, and all that good stuff. And so when I graduated from college, it was like law school, internship, $0.00. Or you're 20 and you think what you're making right there is good, so just roll with that. So I just stayed with that. It's like, nah, I don't want to do that. But in my mind, since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a lawyer. Bottom line is that all that I know from a business perspective is to drive organizations. That's all that I knew how to do. And I've done it exceptionally well. I'm a phenomenal business person. I know how to make money. I know how to cultivate and grow people. I know how to scale businesses, be operationally efficient, sustain businesses. I'm blessed to have learned to be able to do that. But my gift and my talent is to build leaders. And so what's keeping me up at night now is that I decisioned to transition from corporate America to entrepreneurship. So you guys are the first of very few to know, because I haven't even publicized it on my LinkedIn yet. I decided to go into consulting, and most of the feedback I got was, are you kidding me? How are you walking away from such a good job? What? What about the stability of an income? What? By the time I heard all that noise, it was keeping me up at night. Like, well, dang, I didn't really, and whether you think that you have permanency in corporate America or not, and that also in and of itself is a facade, but it's all on you when you're in entrepreneurship. And so it's been a major transition. Jenny, I got you. You're going to be having a meeting, girl, because you're going to be pouring into my spirit. But it's been a major transition. And there are moments, because I only give myself 3 minutes to be in, any place other than a good place. I give myself 3 minutes. Everybody knows me. I might cry, anxious, worried, nervous. I'm like, oh, okay, that's it. Let's get going. That's my thing. That's my cadence. But every now and then, those 3 minutes were coming up, more often than not. And so that was keeping me up at night. And then ultimately, what I recognized, the bottom line of what keeps us up at night is fear. The bottom line is fear. Regardless of what the actual circumstances are, it's the fear that it's not going to be okay. And so as we go through the specific tangible things that you guys have shared at your table, we want to keep in mind that at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to conquer fear. We want to conquer those things that we're afraid of as a result of thinking that we're going to fail, or we're not going to necessarily be good enough, or it's not going to yield exactly what it is that we want or we expect, or that we believe that we need. And I think that if you keep that back of mind as we start to explore the conversations around what is keeping us up at night, because I heard some amazing things and a lot of different things, but fundamentally I didn't hear anything different that doesn't result in really fear, right? Now there's some of us that are just, we up at night because we're just excited about the next day, and those are great, but it's far in between, right? Until we get to that point, right? So we'll be talking about that, but first, I want to introduce you to two remarkable men. Now I'm single, so anywhere I can get them around me, I'm just going to do it. So I have two remarkable men that are joining me on the panel this morning. The first one I recently met, and as we talk about, and hopefully we'll dovetail into diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because that's keeping a lot of companies up at night. How do I do it? What's the right thing to do? How do I do it without offending? How do I do it right? That's a whole other topic for a different day. But if you need some help, call me, because I'm happy to support you in that journey. But I had the privilege just this year to meet this remarkable man who I will be calling my friend. He doesn't have a choice. You know, I'm one of those people that I just kind of hook you in and you're like, I don't even know her. But his name is Dr. Ian Williamson, and he is the Dean of UCI. And he is just a remarkable person. He's the Dean of the Palmer Ross School of Business at UCI. He's the past Pro Vice Chancellor and Dean of Wellington School of Business. He has worked in over 25 countries. Let me just tell you that. So, true story. When I read his bio, and I was thinking, not today, but before I met him, I was thinking, oh man, I don't know who this man's gonna be. He's probably gonna be some uppity. And then I met him, and I was like, oh, he's just like me. Because, you know, people see us and think our titles and, you know, think that we're somebody that, I don't know who they think we are. And then they meet us, and I've even had people say, well, you're nothing like I thought you were going to be. I'm like, well, what did you actually think? But there are thoughts. But I will tell you, when I met him, I felt like I was talking to my brother. By the way, my brother's over there. So I want you two to meet. But he has an amazing resume. He's going to tell you more. I don't want to steal his thunder. But, you know, he has been the Dean of Wellington School of Business and Government at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. Professor Williamson has also served in facilities at the Melbourne Business School in Australia, Rutgers Business School in USA. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. His passions are helping more people gain access to world-class education, and I love that because he's about people. As such, his research focuses on how to positively impact the talent pipelines of communities and organizations. And he'll share a little bit more about himself as he comes to the podium. But Dean Williamson, I'd love for you to join me up. The other person that I want to introduce, and I don't know if I've said it before, but I will always say it, is Mr. Scott Hamilton. So, true story. The first time I was asked to publicly speak, and it had to be over 15 years ago, but Scott could tell me if I'm wrong. I was speaking on behalf of Girls Inc. And as a board member of Girls Inc., and anyone who knows me knows I'm passionate about women, children, and the underrepresented. And I titled my talk, Leadership Leaders. And I was talking about being a female leader in a male-dominated environment. And when I stood at the podium, I came behind two women that completely put me in awe. One of them, I believe, was the first woman who had gone into space. Really? And then the other one, I think she was like the leader of the national leader of the individuals who are writers and write books and keynote speak. And the bottom line is, I was just showing up for Girls Inc. Like, there was all of these amazing speakers, and I stood up and I said, well, I'm Scharrell Jackson, and I'm not a keynote speaker. I'm just here to talk about being a leader in heels. Well, after I spoke, I got my first standing ovation as a speaker. And then Scott approached me and said, I would love for you to be a speaker at one of my events. And quite frankly, he catapulted my career in speaking. So I'm so grateful to him anytime I have an opportunity to share the stage with him. He's also the CEO of Executive Next Practices Institute, ENP. We have an event coming up soon. If you are not registered, I encourage you to join us. It's going to be phenomenal. It's a research connection forum and think tank of enterprise leaders based at UCI Bill Applied Innovation. ENP hosts multiple industry sectors, leaders for forums locally and globally to examine emerging trends and strategies in unique cross-dominion collaborations. Now, I'm going to tell you, ENP is phenomenal. Like Leadership in Heels, we really talk about what's next in business. What are some of the things and the trends, and what most importantly, what should we do next? So often businesses are looking backwards, but we're focusing forward. So Scott, would you join me at the stage, and he'll be able to tell you a little bit more. But before we get to the guys, I was sharing with you, the things that keep me up at night, being an entrepreneur, at the end of the day, it's just worrying about things you don't need to worry about. And I'll tell you how I solve that at the end of the day. But first and foremost, I'd like to give Ian the opportunity to share a little bit more about himself, Scott, and then we want to hear from you. So I think we're having some sound issues, but I have no idea. Is it working? Okay, well, you know, this is blooper. All right, here we go.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I'm really honored that Scharrell invited me to join this, especially given this is sort of the first time she's had a chance to do this in a while. It's a great opportunity for me. I'm still relatively new to Orange County, so it's just always an opportunity for me to meet and interact with individuals. As was said earlier, I'm the Dean at the Paul Mirage School of Business at UCI. I've been there about 1.5 years now, and previously spent 15 years outside of the United States, so it's a good chance for me to come back. I see myself as a kid from the south side of Chicago. So growing up in the south side of Chicago, Southern California was truly a foreign country. We would see you on television, and we would just be like, yeah, what do you do with palm trees? Like, we didn't understand. It's kind of amazing. I still pinch myself, and I'm like, I live in a place with palm trees. How did that happen? I'm really looking forward to hearing from the tables about some of the things that you're focusing on as leaders in your organization. And I'll just share 2 quick ones for me. One is, you talked about Netflix and Uber. I kind of think higher education is at that point right now, where much of what we thought was just true for the last few hundred years is just no longer true. That the only way you can educate a person is to bring them to a place and to have them in a room. And we just know that's not the case anymore because we had to do what we had to do for the last 2 years. And so how do we think about access in this world that we have right now is one big one. And I'm very excited about that one. So that's one of those ones. It's not necessarily keep me up at night because it's a bad thing as much as I'm excited about it. But then the other side of that is people, really. And I have a responsibility for a large number of individuals, not just students, but also my staff. And that change is dramatic. It's dramatic, it's traumatic, it's exciting. How do you take people through what is a very big transition? And everybody's got their cadence. Some people run, some people run toward the fire, some people run away from the fire. And I have all of them and all in between. And so that's something I spend a lot of time thinking about.
That's great. Scott, I'm going to take this.
All right, thank you. Well, it's a delight to be here with you. And Ian and I also just recently met. And of course, my organization has been partners with the Mirage School for many, many years, and just delighted to work with you and your entire team here. Ian, of course, Scharrell, recognizing you as a speaker, it was a no-brainer. Come on, that was easy. This past few years, I was sharing with Ian and Scharrell that UCI just did this study about temporal distortion, what we've all been going through for the past 2 years, right? COVID has condensed time, warped time. I don't know about you, I'm still writing checks that have 2019 on them. So we come in, and I was asked, Scharrell, this past month to do a speech about the future to a group in Phoenix next month. And I said, I can't even tell you what's going to happen this weekend, much less talk about the future. But we have been, as Scharrell mentioned, over the past 15 years at E&P Forums, really looking at ahead, what's going to come next, trying to give our corporate leaders and others the sense of how they can apply the future to their own organization. So I'm delighted, Scharrell, to be with you here today and partner with you in all the things we do together. I would say also that part of the things, and we invite you to our next event, which is October 6th, I think part of the challenge of all of us is the emotional quotient that's come with COVID. And it's had its good aspects and bad aspects, as our table talked about earlier. But again, just delighted to be with you this morning and sharing these conversations with your audience.
Great, thank you, Scott. So we're having some microphone issues. We don't know exactly why, but we are. But this is the type of thing that you just have to pivot. So what I don't want us to do is, because we don't have a mic, not just talk when you want to talk. So if you have something to say, just say it and we'll just pass the mic. But that is, those are really great. These are two phenomenal individuals, so you are in for a treat. But we do want to hear from you. I mean, we know that people, for me as an entrepreneur and a leadership coach and business consultant, I am consistently concerned about how many people I can help. You know, I was saying my biggest challenge in launching a business that I didn't publicize yet is that I have a lot of clients. And so, you know, how can I help as many people as I can help? Because ultimately that's the reason why I'm doing this. Because I have something to give and it's important. But how do we do that in the most effective way? I mean, our goal is to make sure that each of you are the best leader, your business is running the most efficient, your people are exceptionally satisfied, that your life is well balanced, you know, that you're healthy, and that you're benefiting, and that you're experiencing life at the highest level. And so that's something that, as leaders, whether you're leading an institution, in education, whether you're driving your organization in executive best practice, or as a business consultant, as leaders of your own organizations or your family, ultimately that's what we're talking about here, is how do we do this and be the best version that we can be. So I'm going to start with the table in the back. I'm not sure exactly who is the table host back there, where Ellie and Tay are sitting, but we'd love to hear from you in terms of what's keeping you up at night. Yeah. Now we ask, there's a camera, a video, and a camera person, so the only thing we ask is just be mindful of that, because we're filming things for websites and all that good stuff. So we want to be mindful of that. But
should I go stand?
It'd be nice if you stand, step back a little bit so we can see the beautiful.
Yeah, definitely got to step back. I'm 6'7". So.
I think we can see you. Tell us your name.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Crabb. I serve as the Director of Development for the Palmer School of Business. Pleasure to be here with you all today. One of the things that we discussed over at our table really was, you know, what's next? Like, what's next for you? Whether that be your personal life, your professional life, what's on the agenda, what's on the docket for you next, whether that's growing opportunities, whether that's looking to projects, whatever it is that you have upcoming for yourself. And that can be a variety of different things. And I think it's interesting because that can play so much into not only your professional life, but your personal life as well. And then obviously having that balance. How do you balance work and personal life and separate those two things as well? So those are one of the things that we discussed was, you know, what's next for you on the agenda as you start that next day. And so that's really what we discussed at our table. So thank you all.
What's next on your agenda for your life, just in general, as we focus forward? What are some of the things that we should be thinking about in order to make sure that we can maximize the things we desire? And then how do we balance it all?
Absolutely.
Right? How do we balance it all? I think before we go to the next table, I'm going to ask Scott to get some comments. I can tell he had something.
Only just because you're using my favorite word, and it is highly relevant. We've got to be getting up and thinking about what's coming next. First of all, every morning we're bombarded with all negative news. So the first thing we can do for all of us is put down the phone, at least the first 15 minutes of the day. Don't even look at it. And just look at your family and look at your surroundings and be grateful for what you have. But then the next step is to focus on what is next. What's next the next day? What's next the next week? What's coming in the next year? But also put some practicality around it and say, what is something concrete I can do? And make that decision, take that risk, and move forward on it. Otherwise, you're stuck in this perpetual loop, right, of grinding away at either despair or inactivity. So again, I applaud you for that.
Pause, Don. I think we have a little issue. Is that good? Okay. We told you this is authentic. So things go wrong, we're just like, hold up. You gotta deal with that. You know, it's very true. We're focusing forward, but and I love what Scott said about balance. It's very important, at least for me, that when I wake up in the morning, that I do nothing. Literally. I just wake up. And that I have an opportunity to actually feel the presence of my being, for me, my Lord, before I move. Like even before I jump up and go to the restroom. Like literally, just take pause. For me, it's important that I pray, that I get centered, and I have clarity on what my day will be like. Like I decide the day that I'm going to have. And every day is going to be amazing. That doesn't mean that bad things are not going to happen. But when you talk about even envisioning your future and dealing with the things that come with the day, we have to decide how we want to manage our day. It's a decision. Like if there's anything you can take away, which by the way, we gave you these beautiful bags that, well, the bags aren't that beautiful, but the contents are nice. We gave you these bags. I need you to take your bag out because the purpose of the bag is that there's a notebook and a pen in it. And we want you to use it because our retention levels with all of the stress that we have are slim to none. And it's important. You know, we learn in different ways. You got to write things down. You have to listen. You have to see it. So you have a little notebook in there. You have a leadership and pen in there. You also have a face mask and some hand sanitizer. Use that hand sanitizer. COVID is real. And we encourage you to take some notes because we want you to use the information and the knowledge that you're gaining today for your benefit. Right? Your time is valuable, so while you're here, we want to make sure that you get something out of it. But you know, it is important to think about what's next. It's important to think about balance, and we'll go into that a little bit later and remind us if we miss it. But in order for you to have any level of balance, it has nothing to do with the volume of work that's on your plate or the volume of responsibilities that we have. It has to do with the mindset and our approach of how we're going to tackle our day and the choices by which we make. And sometimes we need to make a decision that we won't be dealing with this today. But starting your day off, as Scott said, without turning on the noise, without looking at your phone. How many of you look at your phone the first time you wake up, as soon as you wake up in the morning? You know what, you guys, I want you to call me for some coaching. Because we're going to work, I'm serious. Do not look at your phone. I am asking for a gift. As a result of today, tomorrow morning when you wake up, you're going to be thinking about Scharrell. And when you wake up in the morning, I want you to make sure you don't look at your phone. Instead of looking at your phone, I want you to take pause and think about the day that you desire to have. Set that in your mind and execute accordingly. Do not look at your phone in the morning. How many of you can honor that commitment? Accountability is key. You didn't raise your hand, sister girl. Do I need to come a little closer? Are you gonna look at your phone in the morning? You promise? Okay, I need your number. I'm gonna call you first in the morning to see if you answer. Okay. No phones. Who didn't raise their hand? I'm serious. This is important. Resetting is important. It's important that we apply things that's gonna help us be better. But thank you so much for sharing that. So what about this table here with Thea and Derek are sitting?
Hello everyone, I'm Charles Frosto. I'm a student at Cal State Fullerton. I know Scharrell to the Center for Leadership. Thank you so much for having me here. Something that we talked about at our table is building human capital, building our A team. During this time, we're looking for people, the right people to employ at our companies, and the right people to maintain in our circle. Building your inner circle is really beneficial to maintaining your value as well. If you surround yourself with the right people, you'll keep going up. And then from the other side of it too, like as a student, we're looking to see where we fit in this world. As a gay Latin male, I don't really see myself in a lot of places, but looking around, I see a lot of pioneers in this room, and it's been really inspirational to hear. So just looking to see where we can go. Thank you.
I mean, as a professor who claims to be someone who does research on human resources and talent, I have to obviously jump in if you're going to talk about building human capital, and that's so critical. You know, we're dealing with, what's next is uncertainty. That's what's next. That you can count on, and in an environment where you're going to have a lot of dynamic shifts, being able to have individuals, I guess you're not going to know the answer individually. The days of a leader having enough capability to sort of have read all the information and come up with the answer and then to disseminate that out that's just not happening anymore. It's too complex. So the best you can hope for is that you surround yourself with individuals that you can bounce the ideas off of and be strategic around that. In the sense that, really first starting on what are you good at? What are you confident in? What have you committed yourself to developing some expertise in? but also simultaneously being honest about what are you not that great at? What are you just okay at? What are you maybe not as passionate about? Pick the people to surround yourself with who can complement you. And some of them may be similar to you, some of them may be completely dissimilar to you. And where you have the breadth in your repertoire as a person, and not just as a leader, just as a person, to be able to see the excellence that they're bringing, even though they're bringing it to you in a form that's maybe not as palatable to what you're used to hearing, because you need that input. And whether we're talking about specific skills, whether we're talking about particular dispositions, those are, I think, really critical aspects to help us deal with periods of uncertainty. It's all about resources. I always say, something happening new is not a bad or a good thing. New stuff happens all the time. The thing that makes us feel as if it's bad or good is capability. When something happens and it highlights something we don't know how to do or can't get access to, we experience it as bad. When something happens and it highlights something that we have a resource around, we experience it as good. We typically call ourselves lucky or unlucky. And one of the big determinations is, do you have a person you can call to help you make sense of that? If you do, you feel like, oh, this is good. I know somebody, this is great. So that is such an important resource, because you're going to have uncertainty. It's about, do you have the resources around you? I just was reflecting on that balance issue too. I think that's a really interesting one because, and I think it speaks to this notion around fitting in or finding that space. We probably had a period of time where it was very easy. It was easier, or maybe more socially acceptable, for us to have very clear dividers in our life. We can segment very easily. Not all of us did that. Some of us were bringing the real whoever we are into every situation, and that's fine. We call those people free. But now I think you're having a lot of people having to develop a new repertoire because, they've been doing work from their kitchen table and now their boss has seen their kids, their cat, and their husband. So it's like, it's not, you can't, whether you like it or not, you're free. And and I think a lot of us are struggling with that, in terms of dress, in terms of attire. I mean, some of us are still forgetting that we're walking out of the house and it's like, oh, they get to see the whole body. And it's those little things. It really is those little things. And I think, of course, now, just taking it to a higher level, we've entered a phase in our community, fortunately, where I think we can have a lot more honest conversations about the cultural heritages, the identities we bring, and that being normalized. And, you talk about diversity and equity and inclusion. A lot of organizations struggle with that, not because we're more diverse. We're not more diverse. It's the same people. We didn't import, it's like we didn't get new people. They were always there. But now we have an environment where there's an expectation that we can actually talk about who we are. And there's an expectation that's legitimized by the environments that we're in. There's an expectation that, I think diversity and equity are easy. Inclusion is the hard part, because inclusion means everybody has an opportunity to set the terms for engagement. And you can't really have an inclusive environment if everybody doesn't get to set the terms for engagement. And so an inclusive environment is, I want to be a CEO, I want to work 30 hours a week because I have kids, and I want to take a 6-month break and I will still be the CEO. Right? And in the past, people are like, well, no, there's only one way of doing that. Well, that's not inclusive. There's a lot of ways. If you're good enough to be the CEO, the fact that you did it over 7 years versus 5 years doesn't change the fact that you're good enough to be the CEO. Right? That's just a skill. You either have it or you don't. Some of us do and some of us don't. The way we manifest it in the past has been very scripted, one script. And now we have multiple pathways. And I think that's the beauty of the conversation we're having right now, and the breadth. So I just go back to that point. Organizations and individuals that don't surround themselves with a broader range of people to help them understand that will struggle because they're only operating off of one script. And, there's a lot, again, we didn't become more diverse. It's almost like, oh, now diversity. It's like these people were already here. You just never asked them to talk to you about who they are. And that's the big challenge that leaders are facing right now.
I love that what you said, and as I'm training organizations on diversity, and Scott and I talked about this, my approach is about diversity of thought, inclusion, and belonging. And so I think that, to your point, it really is about surrounding ourselves with individuals so that you really cover your blind spots. And the idea that, historically, we surround ourselves with people that are more like us, individuals who agree with us. But, I challenge every leader. If you don't have anybody in your life who has given you an opportunity by telling you some things that you need to improve, because as a leader, we need to know, to your point, where are gaps and opportunities for improvement. We need to be asking our individual team members, those who are on the bench, those who are on the ground, where can I level up as a leader? And if we don't have that diversity of thought around us, you better believe that we're not the best version of ourselves. And to your point, those individuals have always been there. They just don't feel safe enough to share their position, which is where your point comes in. We need to create a space where people feel emotionally and psychologically safe so that they can be who they are without feeling like they'll be siloed or ostracized, left out or left behind, have a missed opportunity because who they are is not aligned with who it is that you need them to be in order for you to be comfortable. So I'm hoping we'll have an opportunity to talk about how we can be very effective as we get comfortable being uncomfortable. Because I don't think there is a time in my life where I've ever been comfortable. We talk about it all the time. I was speaking at an organization and I said, I'm uncomfortable right now, and I am right now. It's uncomfortable, but I think that if we learn how to live in that space, we learn how to exercise exactly what you're saying, and we open our minds up and our worlds up to have more diversity of thought, which means that we're going to be forced to be inclusive. And in order to be inclusive, don't just invite me to the party, ask me to dance. Right? People need to feel like they belong. And so as we talk about human capital, and how do we not only acquire talent, but how do we retain them, inclusion and belonging is critical for employee retention, relational retention, right, frankly. I love to hear from the table over here, Jenny, and great to you guys are. Hello, beautiful woman in the red dress.
Yep. So my name is Danica Dedman, and I am the Director of Expansion for an organization that comes alongside companies to support their employees. So we're care partners to pay attention to the well-being of everybody on your team. And I'm really passionate about what I do. And alongside my lovely ladies at this table that are also very passionate about what they have felt called to do with their lives, we're balancing that with laying in bed at night thinking about our families and wondering, am I giving my best to my work because I'm passionate about what I do and not giving my family perhaps my best? Am I running out of time with my kids at home? Am I running out of time with the fact that I have aging parents that I need to help them get prepared for this next season of life? And how can I make sure I'm staying true to this calling of running a business or serving on a board and being passionate about that, but then this weight of running out of time with things that are happening in my personal life. So kind of a summary of what we talked about.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. One comment I'll say quickly about that is that, we have to give ourselves permission to have some grace and mercy to ourselves. We have to give ourselves permission sometimes to set specific things aside because everything's timing is not now. And as we are setting the strategy for our life, because success starts with strategy. You got to make a decision. You need a strategic plan. Understand what your end game is. And then, of course, what is the time frame in which you want to accomplish it? How are we going to get there? Do we have the right people around us? And do we have the capabilities to pivot? Do we have the resources that we need to get there? And then, are we prepared for disruption? Because disruption comes. We're in the midst of running a business. Life is great. COVID showed up. You think everything is going well, and what did my child do? My parent is sick. I've lost my job. A relationship ended. The bottom line is there is going to be disruption. So when you think about your strategic plan, don't forget disruption. That must be part of the plan. Because it happens. The idea that things are just going to run smoothly, and then all of a sudden we feel like we just hit some catastrophic event, as a leader of oneself and of others, That has to be part of the strategy. And part of that strategy also is ensuring that I am the best version of myself. So if I am worrying about my family, then I'm not going to show up my best. If I'm not doing what I need to do to make sure that myself, Scharrell Jackson, is getting enough rest, sleep, exercise, eating right, whatever that needs to be for me, then I'm not going to show up the best version of myself. And I won't have balance. And while it seems very difficult, it's fairly simple. It just starts with a choice. And then putting the people around you who can walk you through how to do it effectively. I love what you said, Ian, about we don't have to know it all, but somebody does. If somebody asks me a question, and those who work with me, and Ginger probably can say it, or Dara, they never come and say, why don't, the answer is, I'll look into that and get right back to you. I mean, at the end of the day, we have every resource available to us. I would encourage each of you today, and if you haven't, has everyone dropped, if you still have a business card, because we have a great raffle prize. If you have a business card, or you want to write your name on one of the pieces of paper in your notepad and write your contact information, put it in that lovely basket that Vanna's holding up at the back. Because we have a raffle at the end. But the other thing I want you to do is make sure that you connect with the people here, because these are your resources. These people in this room are your resources. So in order to execute, to have that balance that you're talking about, we need to use our resources. What about at this table here? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just was reflecting on the comment around, am I giving enough here? Am I giving enough there? And am I giving enough? And one of the things that we certainly hear a lot of discussion about right now is burnout. And we're doing some work right now in the healthcare setting, and that's certainly a space where tremendous levels of burnout. And there's sort of like two big causes, if you like, or at least two big ones. One is I'm being expected to do something that I just don't have the resources to do. Right, so oftentimes it's like I'm in a job and they're asking me to do stuff and I don't know how to do it. Right, that's going to create a sense of stress and burnout. Another one though is maybe more self-inflicted. It's I had an expectation of what I was going to do and I didn't live up to that expectation. And sort of I had a plan and then I'm trying to execute that plan but I'm not able to do it. And that's almost always because of things that are outside of our control. But I still feel a sense of frustration and stress and burnout because I had an expectation, but we kind of forget, like we made that up. Like that was, and whenever a strategic planning is something we spend a lot of time thinking about in business schools, and every CEO will tell you have a strategic plan, and then I think that's important, and then I always reflect upon the great words of the modern philosopher Mike Tyson when he said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the mouth. And I think that's just real. Right, and then, it was a suggestion. It wasn't etched in stone. This wasn't the 10 Commandments. This was like a suggestion. It's a course of travel. And so every plan has somebody at some point in time getting hit in the mouth where you go, okay, that's a just. Is that still feasible? Is that possible? Is that practical? Is that even optimal? Like it's okay. I think we have a perverse perspective on leadership, which is know all, see all, do all. And that causes us a lot of problems. Like if a leader gets up and says, we had a plan, and we had to change it, there's some notion of failure. But it's oftentimes just realizing that we're in a broader context, right? That there are variables that we can't control. Maybe the more effective leader is the one that just says, listen, there's some stuff we can't control, but we're not super. We're going to actually be observant as to what's happening around us and act like it's real if it happens, as opposed to just put our head down and barrel through. So I just think that's part of the story around kids get sick, parents get old, I get ill. Tires get flat, like it just happens. Maybe we won't get that done today, and we're still moving in a direction of positive travel.
I love that. Thank you so much, because it is so important that we leave room to pivot. Yeah. I mean, we have to leave room to pivot. The idea that things are going to run perfectly is why, to your point, people are stressed out. These false sense of realities of how life is going to pan out. It's not true. When I joined the industry, I said, I think this is going to be the company that I retired from. And God was like, okay. I did. I really did. I said that. I mean, I hired my whole team of amazing people to trudge forward. And God was like, I need you here. Like, I need you to help the masses, not one company. I need you to be set among. There are too many leaders who need support. to drive their business to excellence. What? But I had a plan. And so I love the fact that you're saying, because it's so true. And that is where the stress comes from. It's that pivot, it's that disruption. It's the fact that things are not going the way that we expected them to go. And now we're marinating on it when we should just expect it. Man, it makes the stress go down.
It does, and the other parts of this, and Ian, I really appreciate your comments, and Scharrell as well. As leaders, we need to recognize that it's all these things about being inclusive, but also recognizing that both overtly and covertly, our organizations over years have set up structures, policies, practices, a culture which turns out to be non-inclusive, doesn't respect the opinions or decisions of others, and isn't an open environment. We have set our organizations up the wrong way. So we've got to look at them again with a fresh eyes and say, this policy, this practice belongs in the 1970s, goodbye, we won't see you again. And that's really what's standing in the way of a lot of people. I'm going to quote Denzel Washington from the movie Training Day. It's chess and ain't checkers. Right. We've got to look 2, 3, 4 steps down a pike and look in alternate directions. But again, this is the one thing we hear the most often from employees. Now that they've had 2 years to step back in their own environments and reevaluate their relationship with work, they've had 2 years now, and they've said, this is how I reevaluate you and your organization and your policies and your practices. Listen to them now. You will never get this opportunity again. Gen Z, that's another story. Gen Z is they're already way out there. But for other generations, they've had time to step back and say, and realize they're empowered to tell you what's going wrong with your organization and what's standing away of them being part of the process.
And to your point, it's critical that within the culture of your organization, I personally believe that you need to have a culture where every voice matters. Without that, we have missed opportunity because we should be asking our people. We're going to get into that, but I'm going to move over to this table here. So what's keeping you all up at night?
Hi, good morning. My name is Latia Kane, and I'm the Youth Leadership Development Coordinator at Big Brothers Big Sisters. I have a team of my team here. What we talked about having our staying up at night is just the process of keeping our students in a pipeline of being successful, teaching them 21st century skills that will allow them to pipeline to a university, or ensuring that they are able to advocate for themselves and be a leader for themselves. And until you do that, usually excellence is the expectation, but sometimes you need the assistance through a mentor to do that. And so what keeps us up at night is also our family, making sure that we intertwine that and keep a life that's balanced with, understanding and, like you said, pivoting.
Thank you so much. And what about back here at this table? Straight table. Here. Thank you. Hi.
Good morning. This coffee is really strong. What I learned is there are people at this table that sleep very well at night. Nothing keeps them up at night, but a lot of us are up at night worried about many things. But my name is Michelle Duong. I'm the Senior Director of ADECO Staffing. I have a colleague here, Lee Walker, as well. Many things keep me up at night, professionally and personally, but the table as consensus, mental health, unity and divide within our community, just worrying about what the unknown for the next generation, because things are constantly changing now. From a professional perspective, in the staffing industry, we talk to clients and candidates on a daily basis. And the main topic has been brought up at the table here and with our clients is retention and turnover and the ability to attract the right talent. I think one of the things our CEO shared with us was trust is currency. So how do you build trust within the organization? I think the main factor that we've always discussed is communication. We all work remotely, we have hybrid situations, in a hybrid environment. You don't know when the colleague next to you is going to be in the office, what's their schedule, how can you get on the same page. In a remote environment, we're always on videos, so how do you keep them engaged? How do you really get them to be authentic, to open up, to have the ability to understand what they're going through, understanding people's strengths and weaknesses to help build that connection. So those are all big challenges that I think at the end of the day keeps me up, because as organizations, I think leaders need to constantly be able to pivot and change and be trained and develop skills to adjust to all the change that goes on and continue to be authentic and genuine, because when we work remotely, like you said, we're just used to seeing people from here up. I mean, my colleague Lee and I text each other yesterday, we gotta find something that we can fit into. When was the last time you went to a public setting? Tell me you guys didn't have that discussion. Okay, so I mean, just being genuine, authentic, and being able to connect with them remotely, I think it's really key and critical right now for everybody to feel that trust, to be able to say, hey, I don't know what I'm going to wear tomorrow to this event. Just basic things like that have really, I feel, is the true disconnect.
Yeah, that's a good point. That kind of catapults us into our first line of conversation around talent acquisition, retention, the great resignation, and the great reevaluation. I mean, as business leaders, for those of you who actually have the responsibility of hiring and or managing people, we know that is a great challenge. So thank you so much, Michelle. Michelle is an excellent resource. She's been a lifetime resource for me when it comes to talent, quite frankly. But when you think about talent acquisition, and each of our panelists will speak to this, our ability to acquire talent today is very different than in the past, where you could just kind of post an ad on LinkedIn or whatever the platforms are today. I think the first thing, to the point that you just made, it starts with who we are as leaders and trust, and the relationships that we have through referrals, because relationships, in my opinion, are critical to the success as leaders, whether it's talent, clients. I mean, obviously we have to do normal marketing and things of that nature, but who you are as a leader plays a major role in who wants to work with you or for you. And then how you treat your people is critical in terms of whether or not they're going to stay with you or go to the next opportunity. And we are fighting the wage increase on a daily basis because it's bananas. I mean, we can hire somebody for the young people, it's fabulous. For you all, I'm hating. But it's like, thinking like, dang, it took me forever. You come out of school with no experience and want 100,000, what? I mean, but that's the reality of it, right? And then there's the competitive around the wages. And then to Michelle's point, and we're in a hybrid environment or remote environment, how do you keep the people engaged? So this morning, we want to have some tangible things that you can apply as you're seeking to acquire talent, retain talent, engage talent, and then monitor and measure balance. Who's good? Who do we keep? I'm learning that companies are investing a lot of time in poor performers because they're having a hard time getting new people. You have people who are high performers that are out of balance. They're on the screen all day, and they're not having the balance at home. All of these are critical in talent acquisition and retention. So I'd love to hear from our panelists about that, anyone in the audience, and I have a few comments as well. I'll start with you, Scott.
Okay, thanks. Well, I kind of alluded to this just a moment ago when we talked about policies and practices, and one of the first things in terms of attracting talent would be throw away that job description and job spec you have right now, because it's already pushing away most of your market. The way you're signaling the market in terms of being inclusive and looking for your best talent is the way you're describing the job itself. And we look at some of these job descriptions out there, and they're automatically excluding broad swaths of the population. I talked with one of our CEO members the other day, and she said, I said, how's it going with talent acquisition? She said, you know what, Scott, I'm not looking for a talent. I don't like the term a talent. I'm looking for the best talent. I'm looking for people who are contrarian team players. Contrarian team players, that's a person that can challenge you and yet work well with others, play well with others. So that's the kind of mindset to kind of take on, so we're being inclusive about who we do bring into the marketplace. There is some terrific talent out there. It's just that we have done such an abysmal job of how we portray who we are as an employer. And we're still a lot to get locked into that 1980s mindset in many cases about what the work environment looks like. So how can we better project an environment that is inclusive, supports people? Remembering this, McKinsey's study just came out last week. The number one reason for people leaving organizations is career advancement / development. Career advancement / development. Doesn't mean they want the next step up the ladder in 6 months. It just means they want to know that you've got a game plan for supporting them throughout their career, that you've got a game plan for helping develop. And many times you're offering them a self-development plan. They can self-select what skills and attributes they want to take on. So again, keeping that in mind, that whole career development track you want to have out there is going to be critical for retaining your folks.
You know, Scott, on that same vein, I'm working with a client right now, and we're doing an HR assessment. And the point you just made about the job descriptions, you would not believe it. I mean, it's bananas. Every job description, I'm trying to figure out how not to insult my client. And the reality of it is, you know, we do have this cookie cutter write-up of what we think we need. But think about this, consider this, and I love what you said about a contrarian individual. We want leaders in an organization, and leadership has nothing to do with job title, not even with compensation. It's individuals who can effectively lead themselves and lead others, who have the power of influence, who are smart, who can learn, individuals who can influence, individuals that you can trust, individuals who can effectively communicate. And so when you're re-evaluating, because I know you're going to, you're thinking right now, well, I probably should look at my job descriptions. When you go back and you're looking at your job descriptions, look at what you have outlined as the requirement for the job. Now, yes, there are specific technical skills that we need in certain roles, but these skills that we call soft skills, those are the critical skills that's going to catapult that person from one level to the next. If you can teach a person how to do certain things, depending on the job, I'm not discounting the technical and the educational requirements of the job. But as you are evaluating your job description, make sure that you're doing it in a manner that is inclusive and that you're not discounting someone because they may not have 7 years or 9 years of experience. But when you meet that person, you recognize that they're a shining star. Give yourself the opportunity to cast a wide net. And to the other point that Scott was saying about just our employees and our employee retention, remember that people want to be in a place where they feel like they belong. And I established so many amazing relationships virtually. So I'm 100% confident that I don't have to be in your office to have an intimate relationship with you. But I do have to show up for you. I have to check in on you. I need to have those one-on-ones with you beyond the transaction that's serving the client. I need to ask you about your day and your children, your pet. Zena has cancer. And so the point of the matter is that connection just requires effort. So when we're talking about our human capital, acquisition, retention, and there's so many other things that I know you all have some valuable insight and input on this. Just consider changing your approach at acquisition when it comes to staff. Just consider it. Consider re-evaluating your JD. Consider the words that you choose. Consider your interviewing approach. Consider that relationship matters when you're seeking to retain and acquire talent. It makes a big difference. It's a significant shift in our ability to acquire talent when we go after it beyond just what it takes to do what we believe the job is. Ben, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I could definitely talk about this one. I mean, I think one, I've had a lot of conversations with different leaders over the last year around somehow of the people that are engaging in all this mobility, they'll come to their senses and they'll realize that, or they'll be punished in some way, and then everyone will go back to being sane again and they'll just stay here for the next 10 years. And it's like there's this hope that, you know, somebody's coming over the hill to save us. And I just said history's not saying that's the case. I mean, there's a context around employee mobility has increased every year for the last 10 years. And the only year it didn't was 2020. But then in 2021, you got 2 years worth of mobility. So it just paused while everyone was trying to figure out what was going on with COVID. So this issue about people moving jobs is not new at all. And there's a lot of reasons around that structurally, around how we look for work. Some of us are old enough to remember looking at a newspaper ad for a job, on a Sunday, like once a week. And of course, my children are getting inundated with job opportunities every 5 minutes without even thinking about it, right? So the search cost has never been lower. It's never been easier to pick a job someplace else. You don't even have to relocate your family. You don't have to lose your friends. So the transaction cost of taking a new job has never been lower. And also what we're asking people to do at work is largely knowledge-based work. We relies on skills as opposed to being tied to some type of machinery. And so I can do my job anywhere, and the ramp-up cost is not as high. So of course, if you have a situation like that, people are going to be much more likely and much more able to move. And none of us in our organizations are going to be able to buck that trend. It's just not going to happen. So then it becomes a matter of, well, what is the reason why they stick with you? Relationship and connection is certainly a big part of that. Purpose is a big part of that. What is your organization trying to accomplish? Why is that important to me? Why would that be something that I would want to dedicate, some portion of my 24 hours every day to you around? How clearly are you connecting or explaining that to individuals? I think is really important. I think that's something that if you talk about the job descriptions, you lead with. It's not, this is the job, this is what we need you to do, this is how much we pay you, this is what we're trying to accomplish. It's really something that I think all of us have always had a lot of interest in. Some of us were trained to maybe put that lower on the list, and we get on younger people because they didn't receive that training. And so they just put that at the top of the list. And there's nothing wrong with that at all, right? Some of us are maybe just envious of the fact that they didn't have to, deprogram themselves to not focus on that. I also think as you're thinking about this issue around what can you train and what do you need to buy in terms of like the talent. I think a lot of us, and this is how a lot of leaders say, I don't like people working virtually because I can't keep track of them. I don't know if they're working or not. I can't develop them. And one of the things I think that it kind of defaults to is we actually probably didn't really understand what was making our great employees great and our bad employees bad. Right? We typically would say, well, they're great because they're who they are, and they're bad because of who they are. And it was all about the attribution being on the person. And that's probably a gross overstatement that we know empirically from the research that a lot of the things that allow us to be successful are not just our innate characteristics, and a lot of things that allow us to be not successful are not just, it's the environment we're in. And it's also getting feedback. And when I talk to leaders and I say, well, what about this person makes them great? Why are they the best, whatever, salesperson, technician? And they say, because they deliver. And they typically give me an outcome. But that's an outcome. That's not what they did. And when you push the leader, so what do they do to get that outcome? And what you typically find for your great employees is most leaders say, I have no idea. That's the beauty. I don't have to watch them. Right? And then that person leaves and they say, I need a great person, but they actually have no idea what they're looking for. Right? And so we never actually did the work to try to understand what were the critical behaviors and activities and dispositions that we needed in a particular situation. Watching your great people perform is actually the only way you can decode what it takes to find good talent. Because then you begin to appreciate what is the stuff that we can teach you, a lot of the technical stuff we can teach you, and what is the stuff that I need you to bring in on day one. And I think that's an interesting skill. If you look at your performance evaluation forms or whatever you're using these days, you typically have volumes of feedback about what a person who's a low performer didn't do, and usually have like 2 sentences for the high performer. Great job, keep up the good work. And that means you as a leader don't actually know, you have never discerned what actually is that person doing. And that cascades, right? Because then when you're doing things virtually, if you can't see them every day, you don't actually know what to look for in terms of giving them feedback or giving them encouragement. So I just think those are the technology is forcing us to refine our capabilities as leaders. We just have to be a lot more in tune to what's going on. We can't rely upon just the casual informal interaction.
I love that what you said, Ian, because especially when you talked about just as leaders, just being more in tune, period. And that's gonna go across every area of our life. I mean, when you talk about acquisition of talent and retention of talent, it really is about the relationship. It's about having a deep understanding of the individuals that are serving and working alongside of you, what their contributions are, where the gaps and opportunities for improvement are, and having that dialogue with them in order to ensure that you understand how well they feel about the position in which they're sitting. I mean, we shouldn't really be surprised when somebody leaves our organization. We should already know that, but it's through the connection with our people. It's through our understanding of what they're doing. It's through our ability to convey to them what we appreciate or what we need, or recognize what they're contributing to the organization. And I think that if we start investing in our A players, our B players, and decisioning on whether or not we can level up our C players, we'll find that employee retention will go down. And not only that, but by leveraging our great people to help us acquire great talent, I mean, in my opinion, I think that's one of the jewels that we have available to us. But again, it comes through that connection. I don't know if many of you have one-on-ones with your team members beyond talking about the job. And I'm not asking that you impose upon their lifestyle or their business or seek to be a nosy Nancy, but really connecting with your people so that to the point about what is a high performer contributing other than the deliverable. You will be capable of putting together an effective offering to your next partner, to your next team member, to the next collaborator who's contributing to your organization. That is great feedback. And so we're hoping that as you hear some of these things and you think about, how am I leading? You know, what am I just trying to check the box to get a person? Or am I looking to add someone to the organization that's going to help me build the future of this organization? And going back to that purpose, it is important that people understand the why. You know, not just what you want me to do, but why. Not just because I'm doing it for a paycheck. Because people will stay with you, even if you can't pay them. You know, people will stay with people that they care about. Going back to what Michelle said about trust. And when you also, in these high performers, and I do want to get into this whole thing around not only just talent acquisition and talent retention, but evaluating the bench strength, Scott, because some of the people, what got you here is just not going to get you there. I mean, we're talking about, but Mary's been with me for 15 years, but Mary was bad in year 2. And you still holding on to Mary. And I'm not suggesting that you don't need to have a place for Mary, but is Mary in the right place? No offense to Big Rice Games, Mary. but I'm just saying, you know, we need to really evaluate our talent beyond the performance review period. Scott, can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because this gets into accountability as well. Because along with this trust issue about people working remotely underlying that is the accountability. And what we're seeing in a practical sense with companies we work with is you've got project-oriented work, right? And people are remote. Well, someone's supposed to make a handoff. It doesn't happen. Someone's supposed to communicate. It doesn't happen. Someone's supposed to follow up. It doesn't happen. So we're at the early stages of hybrid work. Remote work is great. We're enjoying this. Our productivity is up. But then, after a period of time, these breakdowns start to occur. So one of the suggestions we have, and Scharrell, you and I have done next practice process work with some of your teams in the past. Organizations typically only have 3 to 15 core processes. 3 to 15. Even the largest companies in the world, the large automobile manufacturers, they only have maybe 15 core things they do, whether it be how they purchase supplies, how they communicate with their customers, how they deliver an automobile, for example. 15 core processes. One of the suggestions we have is, right now, take a look at what those core processes are, where the handoffs occur, how do you streamline those across the organization, but more importantly, ask your employees how those handoffs are occurring. Where are the breakdowns occurring? How efficient are we being around these core things that we do? All aimed at the why. And are we being true to the why in doing that? The other thing is that's often cropped up, this is pre-COVID, by the way, when we have these conversations about how people do things, we ask them a couple of questions. Number one, what would you like to eliminate out of your job today? Just stop doing that nobody's going to notice. And number two, what do you want to create that's going to help you perform more efficiently? When we ask the elimination question, that takes stress off their plate. We're taking things people off their plate. This is what you're no longer going to do. You know what we uncovered this time after again, and that is there were reports that people did. There were communications people did that nobody noticed. There were check-in things to cover what they were doing. Nobody noticed when we took it away. And so we were taking stress automatically out of the system by asking that question. What can you stop doing? Nobody will notice. It's something we did years ago that had some value, but it just took a life of its own. Let's stop doing it. And then what can we create based on your idea? You're the employee, you're closest to the work, you're closest to your teammates. What can we start doing differently? Let's try that. So those are a couple of just structural things we've been doing. And I think our timing now, coming out of this, whatever we've just come out of the past 2 years, is ideal because, again, people are sensitized, they're closest to the work, they've seen what works, what doesn't work, and they're ready to tell you what they're ready for next. They are primed to make suggestions of what will make the organization more efficient.
Yeah, I think keeping in mind that our team members' voices matter are critical. We have to ask them what's working for them and what isn't. And you're right, I mean, I typically ask, and it doesn't matter, I can drive to the drive-thru, somebody hand me 2 napkins, there's 5 people in the car, and I say, what cost you to give me 2 napkins? And then they look at me like this, You know, it's just, we do things routinely because that's what somebody told us to do 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And we never reevaluate the process to determine whether or not it's still working. So I would encourage you to do that. But one of the other things that I wanted to talk a little bit about is just our employee development. You know, you mentioned earlier in terms of the development of our team members, beyond what it takes to get the work done. You know, what investment are we making in our individuals personally in terms of just their own individual leadership, the issues that they're facing at home? You know, are we offering training and development? Maybe we don't need to have them in the office depending on the work. I mean, a surgeon needs to be in the hospital. Individuals in manufacturing plants that are built, they need to be in the plant. There are certain jobs that require us to physically be present, but then there are others that do not. When it comes to the training and development, we need to make sure, and I know that we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when you talk about staff and client retention and client acquisition, make sure that we're offering our staff training and development that helps them personally. We have to invest in our people. And I wanted to talk a little bit about inclusion and belonging, diversity. We know that organizations are just individually in our lives, but that is a big deal, and that's something that's keeping us up at night. I'd love to get some feedback with you on some of the programs that are going forward in various companies around diversity, inclusion, and belonging.
Well, Ian, I know you will want to speak to this, but just, you know, we've been doing these DEI and B events now for a decade.
A long time.
And I'd like to say we've moved the needle, but I can't say that in all honesty, because it's a constant drive to say, how as organizations can we look differently, be differently in terms of how we're including people in decision-making, hiring, and everything else. So one of the challenges we have, I'll just use this example. How many of you remember the cartoon show, The Jetsons? The Jetsons, remember that? It's set in the 2000s or whatever, and they're flying around in these cars and have instant meals. And that show was created back in the 60s, and they were projecting the year 2000 plus. But they were projecting 1960s values into the future. Notice that it was a traditional family, traditional white family. The maid was a robot, which had a different ethnicity, which was a really disturbing component. And then the wife was the traditional housewife, you know, working at home, cooking the meals. The husband went to a job. This is set in the future, right? 8 to 5, flying in his car to an 8 to 5 job. So the challenge we have as organizations when we project against our organization as we look forward, we're applying that same kind of mindset. We're applying how things are today or used to be and trying to project an organization as it will look in the future without considering the differences in our organization, the different perceptions, the different cultural backgrounds, and saying how is that going to blend and how we're going to, more importantly, take advantage of all this diversity, diverse ideas, different diversities of opinions, and different life experiences, and use that as a strength for our organization. How do we flip this around so our future doesn't look like the Jetsons, but looks closer to reality, a reality that says everyone's included, and that as a team we're much stronger for it. So it's kind of what we're seeing now in this. As leaders, we all have blind spots, all of us. So what are our blind spots? What are the blind sides we have, and who's around? You've said this many times, Scharrell. Who is around us that can challenge us about our blind spots and say, you need to look at this differently. You need to be speaking to it differently. You need to be approaching these issues differently. And with that, if we can gain that kind of awareness, we're all better leaders for it.
And if we don't have that, we have to ask ourselves, especially as we think about mental health, because that's just prevalent in our life, in work and in our homes. Why not? Why don't we have that? And what's prohibiting individuals from being open and honest with us? When we think about people feeling emotionally and psychologically safe, and Ian, I'd love for you to comment on this around mental health. Mental health is real. And, I joked earlier this morning that nobody really asked me how I felt when I was young, and they didn't, because it wasn't at the forefront of our minds. But the reality of it is that when we're in the best place for ourselves, then we show up as our best. And if we're not, why not? And how do we support those? And when we are thinking about having diversity of thought, having individuals around us that can help us cover our blind spots, if we think we have an open door policy and no one is walking through it, why not? What can we do to create an environment where our team members feel psychologically and emotionally safe? Where they trust us, that when they say something, that they're not going to feel as if they've made a mistake, or as if what they said may harm them in some way or harm the relationship. Ian, can you comment a little bit about the mental health?
I had the opportunity for several years to work with the organization on this issue, and this was not something that I had given a lot of thought to, but the organization unfortunately had a very severe and unfortunate incident with a few of their employees that were attributed to issues around mental health, and we began to explore what could they be doing around this. And so the statistics were really amazing. So we know across the United States, UK, Australia, New Zealand, the data is very clear. About 20% of the working population at any given time is dealing with a diagnosed mental health issue. Depression and anxiety tend to be the two biggest ones. So 1 out of every 5 employees in your organization at some point in time in their career will have a mental health issue of some sort. We also know that for organizations, when you look at the costs associated with things such as disability, time off from work, and all the various expenses that creates for organizations, the single largest driver of that is also mental health. But if you talk to leaders and organizations about their ability to support, cope, and understand this, what you find is a huge stigma associated with this. Most of us, it's not something we want to talk about. There's a taboo associated with it. If you're going through experience where you're having a mental health challenge, you'd be much more inclined to talk to your boss, your coworkers about the fact that you had a stroke or a heart attack than you will to say that you're dealing with anxiety or depression. And I've interviewed a lot of different leaders around this, and the things that they would do, the steps they would take over and beyond to support someone who's dealing with a physical ailment of some sort was amazing. Like, they would just come up with all these accommodations. But if someone self-disclosed around a mental health issue, the leader was always like, well, why'd you have to give that to me? Like, almost like blaming them for making their life worse because they don't know how to handle it. And it's just the public stigma that we continue to have around that. So I think one is it's an issue in all of our organizations, period. Whether you know about it or not, it's something that's going on. I advise you maybe learn more about it. The second thing becomes, how do you create spaces for individuals to actually seek out support? Work is not a neutral bystander in the mental health conversation. It is something that either contributes to our mental well-being, There's a tremendous sense of fulfillment with having a job that gives you a purpose and accomplishing. It's very difficult for any of us to really think about a fulfilling life without some sense of accomplishment at work. So it is something that can actually enhance our mental well-being. But it also is the case that the stress, the challenges of work can also be one of the biggest drivers of low levels of mental health. And that oftentimes is because people feel as if they're being overwhelmed, or they don't have an opportunity to connect or share or receive support. So whatever you're doing in your environment right now, you are not on the sidelines watching. Something about your work environment is either contributing positively or negatively, right? And so you have to have a very conscious approach on this. And so I then think, at least with the organization I did this work with, they were very proactive in actually having an intervention around that. And this is where surrounding yourself with a broader range of individuals is very helpful, because this organization, this particular one, was an IT firm, a very successful software firm. They actually partnered with a not-for-profit organization to come in and provide mental health well-being classes for their workforce. It's interesting because we talked about like training and development, and companies will spend money to train their staff. It is not oftentimes the case that they would think about this as being an important aspect of training that will maximize the productivity and well-being of their staff. But if 1 out of every 5 of your employees couldn't read, you probably will get somebody to come teach your people how to read. So it makes sense to think about this as a strategic initiative. So I think it's something that we need to really be, and I think we're seeing more now, openness to talk about these issues, which is good. But I do believe the extent of what it is in terms of the impact is probably not mapped onto the extent of attention that we're giving to it. And I think that's something that would be a big opportunity for organizations.
Thank you so much. We talked about just authenticity, and in this room this morning, the things that I'm hearing you all share around balance and really understanding that to have balance is a choice, and how we decision about our day every single day. We really do need to think about the type of days that we want to have and make a decision when we start our day on the choices that we're going to make throughout our day, so that the stresses of our decisions don't impact us in a way that causes us negativity. It's important that our body is not experiencing something that is not good for us, that our mind, but it starts with our choices. Now, there are things that are inflicted upon us. We have a death, there's a loss, you have a car accident, somebody gets sick, these things that are uncontrollable. But you have to position yourself to deal with those disruptions, as we talked about earlier. And as we talk about just the employee engagement, employee retention, evaluating our bench strength, it is important that we look at our approach. How are we approaching the attraction of talent? How are we approaching the retention of people? What are we doing different today, let alone last year or the year before, but pre-COVID? And if we don't have the skills and the knowledge, just because it's expected of us, maximize the resources around you so that you can level up your employees' experience and you can accomplish the goals that you have set for your people. Invest in an employee engagement program. Invest in an employee engagement leader that is focused on your people with inclusion, belonging, mental health, personal and professional development top of mind. And not as some initiative where you check the box periodically, but embedded in the culture of your organization. As you are thinking about what is next for you as an individual. Am I doing what I really want to do? Focus on your purpose. Focus on the gifts and talents that you truly have. If you are not executing in a way that is giving you the fullest value, where you know and you feel good about the contributions that you're making to yourself and to others, push through the fear and reevaluate and make some choices. And again, maximize your resources. You have resources around you. And we didn't even get to some of the constraints around running a business with supply chain and all of the regulatory changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis. Not only can we not get talent, we can't even get supplies in some industries. The access to capital and the lack thereof, depending on the size and scope of your business. The challenges of a business leader are insurmountable. And the point that's been made by our fabulous panelists that we are expected to have the answers, it's unrealistic. But collectively, we can accomplish whatever it is that we want. Push past the fear when you're dealing with these critical issues, like mental health, like problems with our children, financial issues, a legal issue that might be happening within the workplace, or even personally. You've got to be able to push past that fear and seek and ask for the support that you need so somebody can walk alongside of you and get you through to the finish line. It's critical that you have the support that you need. Organizations like ENP, the work that you're doing at UCI, the work that I'm doing as a consultant and with Leadership and Heal. We need this. It's important. So as you think about what you want for your next practice, and I'm going to ask them to just give you some tangible tips that you can walk away with, take into consideration a few things. First, ask for help. If you need help, ask. Make a friend. Not somebody that you came with today, but make a friend. You need access to capital, Lendistry is here. I heard somebody talking about well-being. We have an organization that supports. If you want to have a purpose, you got big brothers, big sisters here. If you're looking to contribute to the educational institution and understand, or you need to level up as a leader, reach out. If you want to learn more about being a leader, connect, attend EMP events. If there are specific business needs that you have, you can reach out to me. The bottom line is the resources that you need are available to you. You need help with engaging your employees? Taya's in the back. You want to have a marketing organization that's out of this world? I dare you not to talk to Rachel. You need a company that's going to help you with maintenance and things of that nature that you have in your company? Reach out to Derek. There are resources right around you. Maximize the resources that are available to us. But our goal is that we level up as leaders. That we don't allow the things that we're facing every day to keep us up at night. That we become effective as leaders. That we make wise decisions. And tomorrow morning, I dare you to touch that phone. I'm going to be watching. Scott, I'm going to be parting words, and we're going to do a raffle for a nice prize. I'm actually offering an hour of business consulting, and if you're a woman, you'll like this. If you're a guy, you're not. I'm sorry. And a t-shirt and a hat, Leadership and Heal's t-shirt and a hat. But I want to hear from Scott and from Ian, and then we're going to close it up this morning.
I'll do a 30-second close. And as always, Scharrell, it's been fun working with you. I do have to go back to something you said earlier, Scharrell, about restaurant napkins. I'm from the South. Extra restaurant napkins go in the glove box. Just some, I don't know those. Yeah. Couple of things going forward. One is, we said put the phone down first thing in the morning. The second thing is put the agenda down when you're talking to your employees. Before you talk to employees, put the agenda away. Going back to Ian's point, that first conversation is how are they doing? How are they feeling? Where are they at? Where's their life at? What are they feeling about? They don't necessarily want to share necessarily an emotional issue with you, but just to check in with them, just how they're doing. That's the first conversation, rather than approaching them on a business issue. For you personally and for your organizations, here's a question we always ask at this time of the year since we're getting into fall, and that is, this is a traditional time of the year when you do strategic planning. You're taking the people on-site or off-site to have a meeting. As you're going into these meetings, obviously you're going to have a good firm plan for how you do them, focusing on your why and coming around with concrete deliverables. Be sure that you're focused on what your goals are as an organization for this coming year and get them written down. I can't tell you the number of organizations that have these great conversations, don't write them down, either personally for themselves or for their employees. And so people leave the room unclear about where to go. I got one quick story. We were working with a very large corporation in Pasadena. We went to the chairman's office. They were on the 15th floor, had the conversation, what's your purpose, easily displayed it, where you go on strategically, you could talk about that all day long. Took the elevator down to the 12th floor, next level down to leadership. Purpose was starting to get a little muddled, not sure about the goals. Took the elevator on down to the second floor where administrative was. What's your purpose? I have no idea. We have no idea what our organization is. What are your goals for next year? We haven't heard them. We haven't had a meeting with our leadership in 2 to 3 years. So this issue around alignment is so critical, and using your goals to align your purpose and your goals to align your organization is never more critical. It's just like those New Year's resolutions that we never write down. Same thing. Write them down. Stick to them. You'll have amazing results. I'm not suggesting what you write down today is going to be relevant in June 2023, because you're always reevaluating, right? But get something in place that people can rally around and follow you up the hill.
And if I could just suggest, do that personally and professionally. And if you have children, share it with your children. Your children should know the direction of the family. They should understand what it's going to take. And I would have to talk to them. This is my son here. I have to talk to my children. Okay, this is what's happening. My schedule is going to be a little hectic this week. Where do you need me? What do you do? We collectively, the value is across the organization, not just up on the 15th floor. That's a great example. Thank you. Ian, what are your words?
So I completely agree with the goals. That's really critical, and I think the bigger thing I took from your comment was the communication of that and ensuring that everyone is able to at least articulate it. I'll maybe go in a slightly different direction to complement that. We should not underestimate that we've gone through a collective trauma for the last 2+ years. And trauma shows up differently for different people. There's different triggers, and whether we like it or not as leaders, we will need to be leading our organizations as they recover from a traumatic period. And I think early in my career as a leader, I thought my job was to come up with the best idea. And then later, as I developed as a leader, I thought my job was to figure out how to execute an idea, whether or not it came from me or not. And I think where I've now reached, at least my perspective on what I'm trying to work on as a leader, is how do I create an environment that embraces and celebrates the humanity in each of the people that I have? Because what I've noticed is that there are many different situations in our world today, in our day-to-day life, that do not do that. And if work can be one of those places that actually embraces and celebrates the humanity of each person that's coming in there, the chances of me being able to get a good idea and execute idea go up dramatically. And I think that's particularly true in a period where we're dealing with major trauma. So that's not something most of us signed up for. I certainly didn't sign up for that. That wasn't in the job description for certain. But it'd be naive and probably inappropriate for me to act like my people aren't kind of the walking wounded right now, because all of us have gone through something that none of us could have imagined, and it's impacted all of us in some particular way. So whether I like that responsibility or not, or whether I feel prepared for that responsibility or not, it is one that's there nonetheless. And so the goals and the strategy has to be there, the direction, but keep in mind, you're not doing it in a vacuum. You're doing it with these people.
Right.
Not some other group of people, these people. And all the great, the good, and the bad that they bring. And as a leader, you have to kind of embrace that.
You know, that's fabulous, and obviously I believe in us looking at leadership holistically. You know, I share with my children. I have different age groups of children, and as a parent, and my son has heard this, there have been different roles. You know, I started off as the teacher. Our role was to teach, to train, to parent, to lead, to guide. And then I moved to this coach, where I would introduce the play and watch them execute it. And with this particular big son here, I have big son, little son, I'm the cheerleader. My role is literally to just stand on the sideline, and whether you go left or right, cheer him on. If he falls, go on and just, cheer him on. And I think that in leadership and what you're talking about, which is so prevalent, it's across our life. We need to understand our roles. And based on where we are in given situations, particular situations at work, at home, or in our community, be clear on our role, and that our roles are changing all the time, depending on the circumstance. And we need to show up according to what that particular situation needs, not based on how we just show up as leaders. There are situations in our life that require us to show up according to the situation. So be mindful of the fact that you need to have balance. You need to be the best version of yourself. Decision for yourself first. Set some appropriate boundaries around what you will or will not do. And decide that every day you're going to have a really great day. So we're going to have a really great raffle.
I thank you so much, Scott. I thank you, As we close up this morning, I just want to thank you guys for joining us this morning. I ask that you follow us on social media. Rachel, I said it. Do it good. Follow us on social media. It's 9:30, so we want to be respectful of the hour. I am going to be giving a prize to Heather Peliquin. Heather. So Heather has just won a raffle. A little t-shirt and hat and our coach. Heather, we want to, Heather, you got to take a picture. 9:31, so a minute past the hour, and that is not our. Thank you. Thank you. We want you to join us at our next LIH event. We will have registration opening soon. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating. Liga, our photographer, Don, our videographer, the LIH, our sponsors. We thank you guys so much for your time this morning, for joining us at our LIH event. Please be sure to send me your comments or feedback about the event. And if you'd like to connect, you can always connect with me on social media or send me an email. I really thank you guys.
Of course you are.
For a while.
Yeah.
You know, because it was the right thing for me to do the transition.
Yeah. Fun.
And so our company is based in Georgia and here.
Okay.
And so,
I'll talk to you later.
So I saw the opportunity.
Well, okay, I don't think I have your contact updated info. Your new card. I didn't bring